Hey, I'm Jay Fayza from Rebel.media. I'm right now here with Professor Saad. He's from Concordia University. He's one of the freedom fighters on university campuses right now. And I just wanted to talk to the horse's mouth himself, one of the fighters who's fighting for free speech on university campuses today, to see what his opinions are on feminism and social justice warriors within academia. How you doing, Gad?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
The Gadfather is what they call you, huh? So what do you think? What do you think is the future of feminism and social justice warriors within academia? Just to give you a little bit of a briefing, I think right now in internet culture, feminism and social justice warriors are winding down, and they're starting to disappear a little bit more. So is that a little bit true in the academia as well?
I mean, feminism as a viable scientific discipline, of course, has never had any footing to stand on. I mean, the idea that men and women should be treated equally under the law is something that, of course, any sensible, reasonable person should agree to. The problem is that when you take this position and you start infusing it with anti-science garbage, so for example, to argue that there are no innate sex differences is outlandish. And so I think that, in terms of the scientific standing of feminism, it's probably waning a bit. Social justice warriors, on the other hand, I don't see any evidence that their ruckus nature on campus is dwindling. If anything, it's only getting worse, in my view.
And how is it getting worse exactly?
Well, it's getting worse in that the examples of coddling and the amount of faux rage and faux indignation coming from social justice warriors only continues to increase, right? I mean, I just have to go every day on the website Campus Reform to look at the number of insane instances where students are, taking over the administration's offices and, posting a set of demands that, if they weren't tragically true, would be fantastic satire. And so, again, though, it's important to contextualize the numbers that we're talking about here. Social justice warriors might be a very small minority on campus, right? In my recent address at the Canadian Senate, I talked about the tyranny of the minority, right? So, but it doesn't take many people to poison the well, to poison the environment for everybody. So it's not as though every second student is an enraged social justice warrior, but the ones who are social justice warriors are sufficiently loud and committed that they make it unattractive for everybody around them.
And do you think they get encouragement from faculty, staff, and professors?
100%, right? I mean, it really takes all of these parties to tango for this kind of lunacy to take hold in that ecosystem, right? If administrators were to laugh them out of their office, if they stopped coddling them, if they said, look, you don't come to university to be protected from ideas that are contrary to yours. No, we will not have race-based segregation housing. We fought against that during the civil rights movement, and we don't want that anymore. No, there is no identity politics. No, there are no microaggressions and trigger warnings. If everybody who is running the universities, whether it be the professors and or the administrators, were to not coddle these buffoons, then the problem would go away. But if you're going to be afraid and be intimidated by them, then the vicious cycle will continue.
So coming from my end right now, I'm starting to feel like the new countercultural movement is literally being a productive, useful citizen, whereas the norm is being a useless piece of crap, or in other words, being some sort of social justice warrior who takes it upon themselves to try to enforce their version of morality or their sort of lifestyle upon the rest of the world. Do you think that countercultural movement is a good fight against social justice warriors and feminism, or do you think, especially within campuses and within academia, or do you think the more intellectual approach is better?
Look, all approaches whereby you get into the trenches in the battle of ideas and get your hands dirty and fight are valuable approaches. I mean, as long as they're done non-violently, as long as they're done, hopefully, in the spirit of good debating, decorum, all approaches are fine, right? I mean, the idea, what I try to tell people, I get innumerable emails sent to me saying, hey, what can I do? Well, the first thing you could do is get engaged. Now, people think, secondly, well, but I don't have a big voice. Who am I? Who's going to listen to me? Well, if you see somebody posting something on Facebook that you find objectionable, take them on. If your professor says something that is complete anti-science drivel, challenge them. If your politicians, are too politically correct to mention the word Islam, vote them out of office, right? So there are endless ways by which regular citizens can get engaged, and so all bets are off. Use whatever tactic you can, but just engage in the battle of ideas.
Do you have any sort of sense that the countercultural movement that we currently have has the danger of becoming the problem? Like, for example, you try to look into social justice warriors, and you try to look at their ideology, the logic of their ideology. Many people who combat them might use the same sort of logical deduction. They might use the same sort of logical steps to try to achieve their own goals, but they don't quite realize that they're becoming the problem. Do you feel like that any sort of countercultural movement that attacks social justice warriors has the risk of becoming them, but on the other side?
Look, there's always a chance when you're dealing with humans that people will succumb to the intoxication of power and so on. So it's not.
But do you see any specific group right now?
I'm sorry?
Is there any sort of specific group right now that's doing anything like that?
I can't speak of a whole countercultural movement. I can speak about individuals who have large enough platforms that they're helping and shaping the discourse, whether it be in academia or whether it be on YouTube and so on and so forth. But the reality is that the unique beast of the social justice warriors, which, by the way, is something that I'll be covering in my next book that I'm working on right now, is that they really have taken a bunch of viruses of the human mind and use them as the foundation of their ideological position. So postmodernism and radical feminism and identity politics and intersectionality and multiculturalism, put all of these viruses of the human mind into one cocktail, and you get a very unique beast called the social justice warrior. So yes, other movements can come along that might be equally totalitarian, but there is something quite unique about the social justice warrior beast.
And do you have any optimism that universities can fundamentally change given what has happened to universities in the past 40 or so years?
I do, in that, look, the Soviet Union collapsed, right? I mean, there are many bigger institutions and empires that have fallen. And so there's no reason to assume that we can't redress the current lunacy that we're facing. But again, it takes commitment from every foot soldier in the battle of ideas, right? I mean, one of the problems is that people always think that, well, someone else will take the mantle of this fight, right? I'm too busy with my daily life. I'm not important enough. I might suffer too many consequences. I might get a bad grade on my test if I speak out against my professor. And so what ends up happening is what's called the tragedy of the commons, right? Everybody thinks that someone else will do it. Someone else will be honorable. But then everybody thinks that. And so you get a tragedy of inaction. And so what I argue is, no, you all have a voice. You all have, in your small, unique ways, the ability to redress the situation. So overall, I'm optimistic, but I implore everybody to get engaged.
I'm not really optimistic. I've been on university campuses. I've seen what social justice warriors and feminists and postmodernists do. It seems very daunting for people who are on the front lines, or even people who are on the periphery who are tackling these sort of issues. Do you have any message to them?
As I said, fight, fight, fight. Don't think that the battle is lost. There have been many greater fights throughout history with much worse odds than the one that we're facing. I mean, the reality is that it is true that currently there's a handful of professors that we could probably name on one or two hands that are publicly engaged. But the reality is, I see that a growing number of professors write to me privately and say, hey, I'm on your side. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Yes, they're not yet quite comfortable in coming out in the open, but I think that once you get a critical mass, then we will redress the ship.
Well, I find that bizarre that professors, out of all people, would be hesitant to stand up for the freedom of speech and expression and stand up against this monster that is feminism, social justice warriors. I mean, don't they have tenure?
Well, first of all, they do have some of them have tenure, but the reality is that the cowardice of people, not just academics, but the cowardice of people is simply baffling. I mean, you'll get somebody who'll say, well, I don't want to rock the boat because if I rock the boat, the chair of our department might punish me by not giving me my preferred course to teach in the hour that I want. And so suddenly they're willing to sell, freedom of speech down the river because their chair might give them their favorite course instead of Tuesday at 7 o'clock. He might give it to them on Wednesday at noon. And so, in other words, people are very narcissistic in their self-interest. They're pretty apathetic and they're cowardly. Put that cocktail together and you get inaction. And so that's what I try to do is, in a sense, lead by example, show people that, look, I'm still here. Nobody has fired me. Maybe I shouldn't be gloating about it, but just stand up and history will reward you for having had the courage to defend our most cherished values.
So, Gad, I heard you were writing a book about postmodernism and feminism, how it's exactly affected university campuses in our daily culture. Can you describe what you're writing?
Right. So the book is tentatively titled Death of the West by a Thousand Cuts. And basically what I do is I go over all of the anti-reason, anti-logic, illiberal movements on campuses that have led us to the current quagmire that we're facing, right? So, for example, if you take postmodernism, well, it argues that there are no objective truths, right? Everything is subjective, and therefore that's very anti-science because, of course, science presumes that there is a natural order of things that we're trying to uncover, right? So by that measure, postmodernism is anti-science, right? Radical feminism is equally anti-science because it rejects basic tenets of evolutionary biology, right? So, for example, to argue that everything is due to social constructionism, right? Everything is due to us being born with an empty mind and then subsequently socialized by the patriarchy. Well, that's simply not true. Of course, socialization matters, but of course, there are innate biological blueprints that we are born with. Multiculturalism basically says, well, who are we to judge other cultures? And so it uses moral and cultural relativism to stop itself from ever criticizing cultural and religious practices that are truly barbaric and grotesque. And so all of these different forces, identity politics, another one, right? Everything is determined by which groups you belong to. And intersectionality is the intersection of these groups, right? So I am a overweight, transgendered, Black, Muslim woman who is handicapped, right? Well, boy, that's wonderful. That's the royal flush or whatever the top card in poker is, the top hand in poker is. And so all of these movements are poisonous because they actually move us away from a commitment to reason, to logic, to science, to data, to evidence-based thinking. And so what I do in the book is sort of go through the treatise of how these movements then result in us having the social justice warriors on campuses that we have now. And then what that leads to things like Trump ascending to power because people have had enough of this garbage. It results in people saying we've had enough of the political correctness when it comes to Islam. People should be able to speak openly and honestly about something as important as the link between terror and Islam. And so the book is really trying to demonstrate the cocktail of forces that has led us to this dreadful place that we're currently at.
All right, guys, so thank you so much for joining me. We'll put a link to his YouTube channel below and his Twitter below. The Godfather, have any last words to say?
Fight, 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 and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed my critical analysis of Islam within the UK, like, subscribe to Rebel.media.